I always thought working at McDonald's would be boring. You know, flipping burgers, dealing with rude customers, zoning out at the register while the hours crawled by. I never expected rules. Not normal ones like wash your hands or don't steal from the till. These rules were different, and they weren't just suggestions. I didn't know that yet, though. Not when I walked into the restaurant for my first night shift. The place looked normal enough. The yellowish glow of the menu boards buzzed softly, and the smell of stale fryer oil clung to the air. It was almost empty, except for a man sipping black coffee in the corner. I stepped behind the counter, adjusting my stiff visor. The only other employee, there was a girl with tired eyes and a faded name tag that said Jenna. She glanced at me, then at the clock. "Night shift?" she asked. "Yeah. First day." She didn't smile. "Good luck." Before I could ask what that meant, the manager walked in. Lewis. I knew he was the manager before he even spoke. Something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world, made him seem in charge. He was older, maybe in his mid-40s, with neatly combed hair and a uniform that looked too crisp, too perfect, like he never actually worked the fryers or the grill. "Anthony," he said, his voice calm and even. "Welcome to the night shift." Thanks," I said. Lewis nodded toward the back. "Come with me." I followed him past the fryers, past the storage racks of frozen patties, to a small break room in the back. A single light flickered overhead. Against the far wall was a bulletin board covered in standard notices, payday schedules, safety guidelines, a faded employee of the month photo from 10 years ago. But right in the middle of the board, in thick black letters, was a list of rules. I frowned. "What's this?" "The rules," Lewis said simply. I scanned the list, expecting to see stuff about cleaning duties or customer service policies. Instead, my eyes landed on the first line. 1. If a man in a suit orders black coffee after midnight, give it to him for free. Do not charge him. Do not make conversation. I blinked. "What?" Lewis didn't answer. I kept reading. 2. If you take an order at the drive-thru and there's no one in the passenger seat, hand the bag to the empty space. Do not hesitate. "What is this?" I asked again, a nervous laugh creeping into my voice. Lewis still didn't react. "Keep reading." 3. If you hear knocking from inside the freezer, do not open it. No one is inside. My throat felt dry. I read faster. 4. If a child in a blue hoodie asks for a midnight special, tell them, "We're out." No matter what. 5. Between 3:12 and 3:16 a.m., do not look directly at the security cameras. I let out a shaky breath and turned to Lewis. "This is a joke, right?" Jenna, who had been leaning against the doorframe, shook her head. "It's not." Lewis just watched me, his face unreadable. "Follow the rules, and you'll be fine." I tried to laugh again, but it didn't come out right. "Come on. You seriously expect me to believe this?" Lewis didn't blink. "I expect you to follow them." A silence stretched between us. My eyes flicked back to the list. Something about the way the words were written, so plain, so matter-of-fact, made my skin crawl. Genocide. "Look, just do what they say. Trust me." I glanced at her. There was something in her expression, something uneasy, like she wasn't just humoring the manager, like she had seen something. Lewis checked his watch. "You're on register tonight. First shift's easy. Just take orders and follow the rules." Then he turned and walked out. I stared after him, then back at Jenna. She hesitated before following him, leaving me alone in the flickering light of the break room. My eyes drifted back to the list. 3:12 to 3:16 a.m. Do not look at the cameras. I swallowed hard. What the hell had I just signed up for? My second night shift at McDonald's felt just as dull as the first. The smell of fryer grease clung to my clothes. The buzzing fluorescent lights made my head ache, and the only customers past midnight were either too drunk to care or too tired to be polite. It was just me, Jenna, and Lewis working. Jenna handled the grill while I took orders at the front. Lewis, as always, stood by the office door, watching everything with those dark, unreadable eyes. By 2:30 a.m., the place had fallen into that eerie late-night quiet, the kind that made the hum of the ice cream machine sound like a distant growl. That was when the drive-thru speaker crackled to life. "Welcome to McDonald's," I said, rubbing my eyes. "What can I get for you?" The voice that answered was flat, emotionless. 2 cheeseburgers, a large fry, medium Coke. That'll be $8.79. Please pull up to the first window. I tapped the total into the register and waited. A minute passed. Then another. No headlights appeared in the drive-through lane. I leaned out the window, squinting into the dark. The security cameras showed a single car idling by the speaker box, but for some reason, it wasn't moving forward. The air inside the restaurant suddenly felt heavier. "Hey man, you still there?" I called out through the speaker. No answer. I turned to Lewis. He hadn't moved from his usual spot near the office, but I knew he was listening. He always was. "Should I cancel the order?" I asked. "Wait," Lewis said. A few seconds later, the car finally rolled forward. A black sedan. Tinted windows. It stopped at my window, and I reached for the card reader. "That'll be." Then I saw it. The driver was a man in a gray hoodie, his face hidden by shadows. The window was barely rolled down, just enough for him to slide his card through. But what made my stomach twist was the passenger seat. It was empty, but the receipt printer spit out a message anyway. "Hand order to passenger." I frowned, glancing at Lewis. He was watching me now. His face was blank, but there was something sharp in his eyes. Sir," I said to the driver. "You're alone. I can just hand the bag to you." The man in the hoodie didn't respond. He just sat there, motionless. The silence stretched. A cold, crawling feeling spread across my skin. The air inside the car seemed wrong. Like the space in the passenger seat wasn't empty at all, but holding something I couldn't see. The receipt was still in my hand. "Hand order to passenger." I swallowed hard. "Sir." The man in the hoodie turned his head toward me, slow and deliberate. I never saw his face, because before I could, Lewis grabbed my wrist. His grip was strong, stronger than it should have been. His fingers dug into my skin, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Give it to the passenger." I stared at him, confused. "Tony." His voice was sharper now, urgent. "Do it. Now." Something about the way he said it made my stomach turn. With a shaky hand, I picked up the bag and held it out toward the empty seat. The moment my fingers crossed the threshold of the window, the bag was snatched from my hand. I didn't see who, or what, took it. The driver said nothing. He rolled up his window and pulled forward to the next window where there was no order waiting for him. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. Lewis let go of my wrist. His expression was unreadable. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Jenna, who had been watching from the grill, swallowed hard. "You're lucky," she muttered. "Most new people don't listen the first time." I looked down at my hand. My fingers were freezing, like they had been touching something that wasn't meant to be touched. The receipt was still in my other hand, but the words on it had changed. The ink had bled into something else, something scribbled and warped. "Good job." I dropped it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a weird night shift job. Something was wrong with this place, and I had just followed a rule I didn't understand. The night had been slow, the kind of shift where time stretches like melted cheese, making every second feel longer than it should. The fries sizzled in their baskets. The overhead lights buzzed softly, and the faint scent of grease clung to my skin like a second layer. I was wiping down the counter when I first noticed the kid. He was standing just outside the restaurant, facing the glass doors but not coming inside. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for an old sedan parked near the dumpster, its headlights still on. The kid wore a blue hoodie, the hood pulled up so low I couldn't see his face. He was small, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing completely still in the dim glow of the streetlights. Something about the way he stood, hands tucked into his pockets, head slightly tilted, made my stomach tighten. I turned toward the kitchen. "Hey, Lewis, we got a kid out front." Lewis barely glanced up from where he was refilling the fry station. "Ignore him," he said, voice flat. "If he comes in and asks for anything, just tell him we're out." I frowned. "What?" "You heard me," Lewis said, slower this time. "We're out, no matter what he asks for." A chill ran down my spine. This had to be another one of the weird rules, but this one made even less sense than the others. I looked back. The kid hadn't moved. Still standing there, still watching. A few minutes passed, and then, slowly, he stepped forward and pushed the glass door open. The bell above the entrance jingled. I don't know why, but the sound made my breath hitch. He walked up to the counter. His hoodie was too big, swallowing his small frame, the sleeves hanging past his fingertips. I still couldn't see his face, but I could feel his eyes on me, staring from beneath the dark hood. Then he spoke. His voice was soft but clear. "One midnight special, please." Midnight special? What the hell was that? For a second, I almost laughed, thinking it was some kind of prank, but then I remembered the rule. "Tell him we're out." My mouth felt dry. Sorry, kid. We're out." Silence. The air in the restaurant seemed to grow thicker, heavier. The hum of the fryer faded into the background. The kid didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there. I swallowed hard. "Did you hear me? We're out." A long pause. Then, slowly, his head tilted up, and I saw his face. His mouth was too wide. Far too wide. His lips curled up, stretching in a way that wasn't natural. His teeth were small, white, too perfect, too many. The grin kept growing and growing. My heart slammed against my ribs. My feet felt rooted to the tile. The kid didn't blink, didn't move, just stood there, smiling. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back toward the door. The bell jingled again as he stepped outside. I let out a shaky breath, feeling my entire body trembling. When I turned back toward the kitchen, Lewis was watching me. "You said we were out, right?" His voice was calm, but his expression wasn't. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Lewis exhaled through his nose and turned back to the fryer. "Good. That was it. No explanation. No what the hell was that. Just good." I took a step back, my hands still shaking. Something told me I had barely escaped something I wasn't supposed to understand. The rest of the night, I kept looking at the parking lot, half expecting to see that kid again. But he never came back. The next night, Jenna didn't show up for work. And the weirdest part? Her locker was empty, like she had never even existed. I wasn't supposed to watch the cameras. The rule was clear: never look at the security monitors between 3:12 and 3:16 a.m. Lewis didn't explain why. He just gave me that slow, steady look of his and said, "Trust me, kid. It's better if you don't." But tonight, my curiosity got the best of me. The night shift had been quiet. Too quiet. The fryer crackled every now and then. The ice machine made its usual gurgling noise, and the drive-thru speaker let out the occasional static hiss. But no customers had come through in over an hour. Jenna wasn't here anymore. I still didn't understand what had happened to her. One night she was standing beside me, laughing about how creepy this place was. The next, she was gone. No one talked about her. Not even Lewis. It was like she had never existed. I needed answers. The break room was dimly lit, the yellowish glow of the fluorescent bulb buzzing overhead. The security monitors sat on the desk, flickering through the different camera feeds: front counter, drive-thru, parking lot, kitchen. Everything looked normal. Then the clock hit 3:12 a.m. The screens glitched. For a moment, everything went black. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room, the kind of silence that made my ears ring. I leaned in closer, my breath slow, controlled. The screen crackled back to life. But the restaurant was gone. The cameras no longer showed the front counter or the drive-thru or the kitchen. Instead, the footage displayed something else entirely: a long, underground tunnel lined with dirty, grease-stained McDonald's uniforms. They hung from the walls like skin, limp and lifeless. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, fading into darkness. My stomach tightened. What the hell was I looking at? I turned to another camera feed, my fingers trembling. The screen shifted, and then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Me. I was standing at the front counter in my uniform. But it wasn't me. The other me was grinning, too wide, like his face had been stretched beyond its limits. His eyes were locked onto the camera, staring at me through the screen. I was sitting in the break room, but he was out there, waiting, watching. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The figure in the camera raised his hand slowly and waved. The lights in the break room flickered. The drive-thru speaker let out a long, ear-piercing screech. Then, darkness. The monitors shut off. The sound cut out. I shot up from my chair, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. My legs felt weak, my breath shaky. I spun around, expecting to see something behind me, but the break room was empty. Everything was normal again. The monitors powered back on, cycling through the usual feeds: the kitchen, the counter, the empty parking lot. No tunnel. No uniforms. No other me. I took a shaky breath. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I had imagined it. But when I looked down, my hands were still shaking. And deep in my gut, I knew I had broken a rule. And now, the restaurant had noticed me. The moment I stepped into the break room, I knew something was wrong. The fluorescent light above me flickered, casting long, jittery shadows along the grimy tile floor. The air smelled of fryer grease and something else, something damp like old wood rotting in a basement. Lewis was already there, sitting at the small metal table, sipping from a McDonald's branded coffee cup. His uniform was spotless, his name tag gleaming under the artificial light. He didn't look up when I walked in. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. My heart pounded in my chest. My hands felt clammy. "We need to talk," I said. Lewis took another slow sip of his coffee. Then, finally, he raised his eyes to meet mine. Dark. Unreadable. "About what?" he asked, his voice as calm as ever. I clenched my jaw. "You know what? The rules. Jenna. The cameras. What the hell is going on in this place?" For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, studying me, his fingers tapping lightly against the side of his cup. Then, with a slow sigh, he set it down. "You've been asking a lot of questions, Tony," he said. "Yeah, because none of this makes sense." My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care. Jenna disappeared, and no one talks about her. The drive-thru orders don't add up. And the cameras. I stopped myself, my breath catching in my throat. Lewis tilted his head slightly. "You looked, didn't you?" My stomach twisted. I just glanced at them," I admitted. He shook his head, almost disappointed. "That was a mistake." I swallowed hard. "Why? What did I see?" Lewis leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You're asking the wrong questions, kid." My fingers curled into fists. "Then tell me the right ones." He was silent again, just staring at me. For the first time, I noticed the deep lines around his eyes, the exhaustion buried beneath his otherwise expressionless face. He looked like a man who had been carrying a secret for far too long. Finally, he spoke. "Have you ever wondered why this McDonald's never closes?" I blinked. Of all the things I expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. "What?" "Most places shut down for a few hours, at least for cleaning. But not this one. Not the night shift. Have you ever asked yourself why?" I had never really thought about it. But now that he said it, it was weird. Even 24-hour fast food joints usually had slow hours, moments when they felt empty, abandoned. But not here. Here, something was always happening. "The rules aren't just rules, Tony," Lewis continued. "They're agreements." A chill crawled down my spine. "Agreements? With who?" Lewis didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his cup again, took another sip, and set it back down with a soft clink. "The restaurant notices when you break them," he said simply. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Notices? People like Jenna, people who don't follow the rules." His voice trailed off, and for the first time, I thought I saw something in his expression. Regret. I took a shaky breath. "Where did she go, Lewis?" The break room felt impossibly small now, the air thick and suffocating. Lewis looked at me for a long time, then finally stood up. He smoothed the front of his uniform, took one last sip of his coffee, and walked to the door. As he passed me, he stopped just long enough to whisper, "You're already in too deep, kid. Stop digging." Then he left, the door swinging shut behind him. I stood there, heart hammering, mind racing. And for the first time since I started working here, I realized I might not be able to leave. I wasn't supposed to look at the cameras. That was one of the rules. But at exactly 3:15 a.m., I did. The monitor flickered, static crawling across the screen like ants. For a moment, I thought it was just another glitch. But then the feed changed. Instead of showing the front counter or the empty dining area, it displayed something else. A tunnel. It stretched deep underground, its walls lined with something dark and pulsing. Old, grease-stained McDonald's uniforms hung from the ceiling like shed skins. The deeper the tunnel went, the darker it became. And then, something moved. A figure, crawling on all fours. Its limbs were too long, its skin stretched too tight over sharp bones. It had no eyes, just a wide, drooling mouth that smacked hungrily as it dragged itself forward. Toward me. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. The screen flickered again. And then I saw the worst part. The thing wasn't in the tunnel anymore. It was in the kitchen. The fryers hissed. The overhead lights buzzed. But everything else was silent. The air felt thick, like the whole building was holding its breath. I turned my head slowly, dreading what I might see. The kitchen was empty. No sign of whatever had been on the screen. But something had changed. The tile floor wasn't solid anymore. It had shifted, softened like old, rotting meat. The air smelled wrong, not like burnt fries and stale grease, but something deeper, older. The walls seemed to pulse, their colors darkening to a sickly shade of red. Then the drive-through speaker crackled to life. "Order up." The voice was garbled, layered, like multiple people whispering at once. The words sank into my skull, heavy and slow. I turned back to the monitor, hoping, praying, that the tunnel would be gone. But the screen was black. And then, in glowing red letters, new text appeared. "Feeding time." A wet, sucking sound echoed from the floor. I looked down. The tiles beneath my feet were sinking. Not breaking, not cracking, sinking. Like the floor itself was swallowing me. I felt the cold sweat on my back before I heard the crackle of the drive-through speaker. It was 3:30 a.m., and the restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. The kitchen was empty, silent except for the low hum of the fryers and the whir of the ice machine in the back. But the air felt heavier tonight, as if something was pressing against the walls, something just beyond the glass windows. I was alone in the front. It wasn't unusual for me to be by myself at this hour. The late-night rush was over, and most of the crew had left. But that didn't stop the creeping feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced at the drive-through window, where the red and yellow glow of the McDonald's sign outside flickered like it was trying to warn me. I had been here long enough to know that the routine, no matter how monotonous, kept things safe. But tonight felt different. The speaker crackled again, louder this time. A voice came through, but it wasn't the usual customer asking for fries or a McDouble. It wasn't a voice I recognized at all. "Order up." I froze. My heart skipped. The voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere deep inside the restaurant. The words echoed in the darkened corners of the kitchen, and for a moment, I wondered if I was hearing things. "Order up," it repeated, sharper this time. I was supposed to ignore it. The rules had been drilled into me, over and over again. The rules about not talking to anyone who wasn't in line, not engaging with anything odd. Just do the job, keep your head down, and you're fine. But this wasn't just a normal order. I could feel it in my gut. Something was coming, something I wasn't ready for. I glanced over the back door, where Lewis had disappeared earlier. His absence only made the silence worse. I could hear his voice in my mind, his cold words about the rules, about the way things worked here. "You break them, it notices," he had said, like it was a warning. Like I should have known better. Another crackle from a speaker. The voice was still there, but this time I thought I could hear a faint laugh beneath it, like something mocking me from the other side of the wall. "Order up," the voice insisted. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk out, leave the kitchen and the drive-through window, just get away from this place that had started feeling more like a prison every day. But my feet wouldn't move. It was as if the restaurant itself was holding me in place, like it didn't want me to leave. I grabbed the headset from the counter, feeling the weight of it in my hands. The wire was coiled like a snake, tight and unyielding. I pressed it to my ear, and the voice came through again, louder this time, too loud. "Order up," it repeated, and I could hear something else, something scratching in the background like nails against glass. "Order up." I wanted to scream, to ask who was there, but I didn't. The air around me felt thick, like it was closing in. My hand trembled as I reached for the window button. The light from the drive-thru flashed across the counter, and I glanced up. There, standing in front of the window, was a figure, a person but not really. A child, a little girl in a blue hoodie. She was standing perfectly still, her face hidden in the shadow of the hood. The out part? The car in front of her was empty. No one in the driver's seat, no one in the passenger seat, just an empty, dark car with the engine running. I didn't know why, but my chest tightened as I looked at her. The girl didn't move. Her eyes, I couldn't see them clearly, but there was something wrong with them, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Order up," she whispered, and her voice, so soft, so wrong, made my blood run cold. I didn't know what to do. The rule flashed in my mind, the one that told me to never hand the third drive-thru order to a passenger if no one was sitting there. I'd broken the rule before, and I'd felt the weight of it press on me, but this time felt different. This wasn't just a customer. She wasn't just a kid. The girl took a slow step forward, and I saw her hand reach out. Her fingers were too long. Too many of them. I couldn't breathe. I glanced over my shoulder. No one was there. No Lewis. No one to stop me, to tell me what to do. "Order up," she said again, but this time, it wasn't a request. It was an order. I wanted to scream, to pull away, but my body didn't listen. My hand moved, almost by instinct, to grab the bag. I handed it through the window, trying not to look at her, trying not to see the way her fingers curled around the bag, the way the shadows shifted around her like they were alive. And then, just like that, she was gone. The car was gone too. The drive-through window was empty. I stood there for a long time, staring out into the dark parking lot. The hum of the fryers and the buzz of the lights the only sounds left. But something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I didn't see the kid leave. I didn't see her walk away. She had just vanished. Like she was never there at all. But I knew. I knew she was there. I slowly stepped back from the window, my hands shaking. The bag I'd handed out sat on the counter, untouched. And as I stared at it, I realized Jenna had disappeared too. I couldn't remember the last time I saw her. She hadn't called in sick. She hadn't said goodbye. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She had broken the rules. And now, she was gone. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream and never look back. But I couldn't. The restaurant, it was watching me, waiting for me to break again. The air in the kitchen felt suffocating. And as I turned to walk toward the back door, I saw something written on the wall that hadn't been there before. The last rule: don't ask too many questions. You're not ready for the answers. And I realized, for the first time, that I'd never be ready. Not if I stayed. Not if I followed the rules. Because the rules were there for a reason. And the restaurant, it wasn't just feeding on the customers. It was feeding on us. And I had just become the next meal. The moment I looked at the camera at 3:15 a.m., everything changed. It wasn't just the footage that had shifted, or the sudden chill that seemed to suck the warmth from the air around me. It was something more, something alive. I didn't hear the buzzing hum of the lights anymore. The fryers weren't spitting out hot oil, and the drive-through speaker crackled in a way that made my teeth itch. It was like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I looked at the screen and saw the tunnel again. No, not the kitchen or the lobby, not the empty parking lot, but a dark, twisting place beneath the floors. I could see shadows moving, things I couldn't understand. And for a second, just a heartbeat's worth of time, I saw my own face staring back at me, grinning. A smile stretched across my reflection, a smile that wasn't mine. My real self stood frozen, unmoving, but the reflection was wide-eyed, mouth unnaturally wide. And then it disappeared. I stumbled back, clutching the counter for support. My head was spinning. I wanted to scream, to do anything to break the horrible silence that filled the restaurant. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. I felt the weight of something pressing against me, something ancient and suffocating. The room began to tilt, like the floor wasn't a floor anymore, but some sort of soft, shifting thing. That's when I heard it. The whisper from the drive-through speaker, low, urgent, and unmistakable. "Order up." I froze. My blood ran cold. There was no one in the drive-through lane. The screen was blank. But the voice was there. It was always there when something was wrong. I backed away from the register, trying to move, to run. The door behind me, the one that led to the alley, refused to open. I pushed at it, again and again, my hands slick with sweat, but it wouldn't budge. I tugged at the handle, the hinges groaning, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe I could still escape. But then the walls groaned too. The building seemed to shift, like it was alive, like it could feel me trying to leave. I felt something dark creeping into the corners of my mind, something that had always been there, but was only now becoming clear. The rules. The damn rules. They weren't there to keep the restaurant running. They were there to keep me here. To keep us all here. I thought about the child in the blue hoodie, the teeth, the smile that didn't belong to them. I thought about Jenna, who had just vanished one morning. No one mentioned her. No one cared. And then, from behind the counter, I saw it. The thing that had always been right in front of me, just beneath the surface. A piece of paper. A new rule. It was hastily written in a familiar scrawl. "Do not attempt to leave. We see you, Tony." My name. They knew. I stepped back, my legs weak. My stomach churned, twisting into something raw. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. This wasn't just a job anymore. This place wasn't just a McDonald's. It was something else. Something hungry. The walls started to pulse, like they were breathing. The air felt heavy, thick, pressing against my chest. The lights flickered again, then went out. The silence was deafening, and for the first time, I realized that there was no way out. Lewis appeared from the shadows. His eyes were black, empty. His lips curled into that same sickly, unnerving smile. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He didn't need to. The restaurant had already made its choice. And now, so had I. I wasn't leaving. Not tonight. Not ever. The rules were no longer just rules. They were a cage. And I was the one trapped inside. The smell of fries, the hum of the fryers, the flickering lights. It all faded into something deeper, darker. Something that would keep me here forever. I looked at the walls, at the flickering neon signs. They weren't just signs. They were eyes, watching me, watching all of us. And I knew then, for the first time, that the rules had never been meant to protect us. They were there to keep us in line. I took a long, shuddering breath, and the last piece of me, the part that had hoped for escape, for something more, finally broke. And in that moment, I understood the final rule. I was part of the system now, a cog in something far bigger than I could comprehend, and there was no going back.